Hi, you're listening to or watching Ian Heller, and this is What If I'm Right? Today I wanted to talk to you about, music and even more basic vibrations. Um, I actually recently did a lecture. I am a professor, I'm a sociologist, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm a musician. And I recently did a lecture for a group known as Lectures on Tap, for whom I've done, I think, 4 lectures so far. And the topic of it was the power of music in social movements and the law. Roughly speaking, and I'm not going to give you the whole thing over the next couple of minutes. The basic premise was social movements unify and are able to sustain because, in no small part, of music. When we think back on the beginning of, let's say, the 20th century civil rights movement, which many of us call the second civil rights movement of the United States, I actually think it's kind of a third civil rights movement, but it doesn't really much matter. That's one of those silly arguments that who cares about. But the civil rights movement of the 20th century, many people see it as having started when a very disturbing, haunting song known as Strange Fruit was written and by Abel Meeropol and then performed by Billie Holiday. Later, it was performed by Nina Simone. Two of the most remarkably powerful black uh, singers of the 20th century, particularly the middle 20th century, and Nina Simone continued on a bit longer. Um, and that song was a there was a picture that was published in the New York Times that was very haunting and very disturbing. It was a picture in the foreground were a bunch of people that looked like they might have just been leaving a concert in the park or some sort of a picnic. It was the evening, so it was so it was dark already. But the people were milling around. I mean, I know it's a still photograph, but it was clearly freezing people in a as if they were walking around and talking to one another. There were people talking directly to one another, people who were walking, people who were just hanging out, and it looked like a lovely scene in the idyllic South of the 1930s. There was one person, however, who is prominently in the kind of the back of the foreground, pointing to the actual background. And the background were was the horrific sight of um, two black men, young black men, who were tortured and hanged and were just hanging from the poplar trees in the background. And so what you had is this foreground of people who were milling about as if it was just a lovely, lovely night in the South. And yet in the background were the disfigured figures of two young black men who had been lynched by a group who accused them of doing something which chances are they didn't do. The song basically took that foreground and background and inverted them. They just reversed them by basically saying, yeah, you're looking at this idyllic South, but in fact, what you should be focusing on is what's in the background, which are the two disfigured, tortured, dead bodies of two black men. The reason why I mention this in the context of music is so that picture came out in the mid 1930s. Abel Meeropol then wrote a poem which was also published in the New York Times, I believe, a couple of years later in 1937. Without a whole lot of fanfare, not a whole lot happened as a result of that poem. Then he put it to music, and Billie Holiday sang it, and it was a haunting, haunting song called Strange Fruit. And it is credited with having been the kind of the launching point of the civil rights movement of the 20th century. The poem, the words were what were powerful. The music was a, it was a it was a good, like if you're listening to whether there was a good hook or whether it had a wonderful chord progression, when you're analyzing music for music's sake, it was good. Billie Holiday, it's kind of hard to say anything other than she was just an incredible vocalist who was able to just create passion and emotion at a level that most people just can't do. I mean, I'm talking about great vocalists. Very few have the power of a Billie Holiday. But when you really study music in the context of sociological or social movements, what you find is that they create a sense of belonging, an us versus them. Who is us? Who is them? And music is one of those unifying forces where people can bond over a song. In this case, it was the lyrics that were the most powerful aspect of this song. But it was the lyrics and the music and the performance and the arrangement all together that just unified literally millions of people to say this just cannot go on. It told the American public, North, South, East, West, and quite frankly, the entire world, that what was happening in this country with lynchings could no longer be ignored. It was just horrible. It was so easy for people to just turn a blind eye to the horrific behavior of the Ku Klux Klan and others who were torturing and murdering and just making the life of a black person, particularly in the South, but really, quite frankly, all over the country, very tenuous, very scary, and it was the music that unified so many people saying, yeah, you know what? They don't. The KKK and this horrible lynching that have been going on in the South, that we can't abide that anymore. We can't ignore it, and we can't abide it. Of course, it took quite some time before lynchings became a thing of the past for the most part. They happen periodically over the course of a decade, but in those days it was quite frequent, and the threat of it was constant. Music was what unified so many of these disparate people. Now, if we just look at it from a surface level, when people are able to sing together, it's a very joyful or at least passionate opportunity to do something in unison with others, or if not in unison, another wonderful term that describes music, in harmony with others. So music provides the opportunity for people who don't know each other to join their voices in something uplifting. Sometimes the reference point is something horrific, like the lynchings. Sometimes it's something hopeful, like we shall overcome. There is hope. We don't have to tolerate human inhumanity towards one another. And so, that makes a lot of sense just from a very surface level. But let's go a little deeper, shall we? Let's talk about what actually we know a lot more about science than we did then. You've heard things. Look, I'm not a physicist. I'm not an experimental physicist. I don't know. My math skills basically end at the early stages of calculus, and that was about 50 years ago, 40 years ago. Yeah, and I can't do that anymore. But I can tell you that we have, science mathematicians, physicists, have basically come to a conclusion, or at least a very strong uh, belief, that at the essence, at the origin, at the base of everything in our universe, in the known universe, are vibrations. Now, music is just vibrations that we can hear. That's all. Sound waves are sound waves. They are waves. There are light waves. There are all sorts of waves, microwaves, all sorts of waves. Sound waves are just another kind of a wave, which we can hear. That's why it's a sound wave. We can hear these waves. And what we're learning from physicists is that at the base of our known universe, which some people refer to as string theory, are just waves. Things that are constantly moving. In other words, we used to think that at the basis of all of our existence was matter. Right? Matter. Something that you can touch, something that you can feel, something that you can that when you stop it, it is a whole thing. Then we find out that actually at the core root of all of matter is something that we can't, that when we freeze it becomes something else. It turns from a particle to a wave. I know that's way beyond my my understanding, but from what I understand, a light wave, when we freeze a light wave, when we stop it, it is no longer a wave, because a wave is moving, constantly moving, and so it becomes a particle. But light is not a particle. Light is a wave. It's a wavelength. Music is just one of those wavelengths that is constantly oscillating, constantly vibrating. That is all music is vibration. When we think in terms of like things like mating, finding the right person, we often think in terms of, well, pheromones. Well, if you want to catch a moth, a clothes moth, I have actual knowledge of this. You put up these traps that have these little things in them that are pheromonal, that attract them. I don't know if we would call that love, but that's what they were attracted to. Pheromones. Pheromones are just, well, waves that smell. That's all. Well, sound waves are things which we actually is so universal. You know the old saying that music soothes the savage breast. It's not beast, it's breast. Music soothes the savage breast. Well, go back to the idea of mating, of finding that other person. When you find the right person, it often is this inexplicable thing of, yeah, I just got the vibe was right. I just felt like we were resonating at the same level, at the same frequency. It's waves. It's feeling like we are simpatico. We get along. Now, why am I talking about this in a show that's so, I'm not a science show. That's not what If I'm Right is about, because I don't know enough about science, quite frankly, to support a show that's about science. That would be, well, imposter syndrome would be the very least of the very easiest way to describe it. I can't do that. But what I can do is take some of the things that I've learned in science and apply it to things that I am much more expert in, which is things like sociology, things like law, things like music, and say, okay, so how does the knowledge that we are all waves, that everything is at its core, at its essence, not particles but waves, how does that actually help us understand things? It helps us understand because it basically tells us we aren't the same from one moment to the next, from 1 minute to the next. Think in terms of when you're angry. You really want to get those emotions out. A lot of times, I used to live in Hoboken at one time, and there was a great metal place, heavy metal, and I'm not a big metal fan, but I did manage a band that was a heavy metal band, a speed metal band, and so I'd periodically go see them. And of course, you go in there, and it's like this mosh pit. People are just jumping on each other, going on the stage and jumping into each other, into the crowd, and it's to call it violent. It's like, yeah, I even at that point in my life was like, yeah, check please. I'm not going to do that. But they were getting out these feelings of anger sometimes, or frustration, or even just passionate, good emotions. And they were allowing their bodies to respond to the music in a way that just allowed them to feel, just to feel. Now, if they went out after going to that, listening to those bands, if they went out to the streets and they basically treated the rest of the world like a mosh pit, there's a problem. But if instead they were able to kind of allow their bodies to vibrate at a level of frustration and anger, where at the end they were able to kind of calm it down a little, at that point they're vibrating at a different frequency. And what that means to me as a social scientist is that we can change our perspective, our behavior, by changing our frequency. And changing our frequency is not as impossible as it sounds. In fact, we do it all the time. I've got a great example of that. When my older son was a baby and he just would not stop crying. I mean, oh my God. I was, holding it. Wait, do you need to burp? Do you need food? Do you need a diaper change? And you're all sorts of things that you're just trying, and it's like none of them worked. None of them. He would have nothing, just was screaming and crying. Man, did he have a scream. And so I thought, you know what? The hell with this. I can't get him to be quiet. I'm not going to do anything violent to stop him or to force him. He's allowed to feel like he feels, but man, is it driving me crazy. So I thought, okay, I'm going to fight fire with fire. So I turned on, like to 11, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I think it was Fanfare of the Common Man. Either that or maybe it was, I don't know. It was just, I probably listened to a whole bunch of ELP at that. And it was loud because I'm a rock and roller. I love loud music. So I turned it up, and Zeke, my son, as soon as the music just kind of enveloped him and just washed over him, he calmed down, his breathing slowed, and he fell asleep. He fell asleep amid this incredibly loud, and this is somewhat raucous music. Even though it might come from a classical background, the fact is, it's got a lot of percussion, it's got a lot of big sound, and it just calmed him down. It just did. It's like, okay, I figured it out. When he gets like this and we don't have the answer, he's not hungry, he doesn't need a diaper change, he doesn't blah, 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 all the things that you always do as a parent to try and figure out. What we figured out was just give him some music. He's still that way. He calms himself by whistling, by singing, and he's 26. So it's just part of who he is. And that's not unusual in that we all do it. We all try and change how we're feeling, or sometimes to lean into how we're feeling using music. My wife, Laura, who was a guest on this show, is a music therapist. Now, I've been a musician longer than I've been anything except for alive. I learned to read music before I learned to read English. I'm just as comfortable looking at lines on music staff paper as I am words on a screen or in a book. Well, Laura has found in her work that there are people who are incapable or unwilling, whatever, however you want to describe it, whatever it is, um, of communicating verbally. They won't speak, and it seems like they can't speak. And then Laura uses her music therapy skills and the emotions that are locked up behind this veil of silence. Suddenly, they're able to sing, even though they were unable to utter a word. And they're able to sing words. It's not like they couldn't speak. It's not like they couldn't form the words or didn't have language. They just couldn't get that part of their brain was not permitting them to communicate with just words. It was music that unlocked that ability and enabled those feelings to be shared. And so when I look at social movements, when I look at even the law, where one of the things that's very telling is authoritarian regimes, when they want to make sure that they can control the masses and limit the likelihood of social movements, they will frequently create laws that uh, criminalize certain kinds of music or the expression of certain kinds of feelings through music. In other words, authoritarians understand that music is even deeper than their ability to control people's behavior and thoughts. I have I've been a musician since I'm literally 4 years old. I've been surrounded by music since I was born, literally. 3 older sisters, professional musicians, a father who had a beautiful voice and played trumpet beautifully, um, and a mother who couldn't sing, but and yet I loved when she did. um, and when people, I'm a lawyer, I'm a sociologist, I'm a professor. I used to manage people who are in the media world, in radio, television, internet, publishing, all sorts of stuff. I've done so many different things. I've got more careers than I have fingers or toes. But whenever I have been asked, well, you do a lot of stuff. What are you? It's actually a very easy question to answer if they're asking about what I am at my core. I'm a musician. Everything to me is music. When I was doing video editing, the rhythm was what enabled me to make good video editing decisions. It wasn't the words, it wasn't the look, it was the rhythm. And rhythm, and also to a certain extent, there's modulation in pitch as well. But whenever I feel like I understand something, including law, whenever I'm writing, whenever I'm speaking, it means that somehow in my firmware, my brain, I've taken a concept, something, an experience, an event, an effort, and I have figured out what it means to me as a musician. And I end up feeling like everything I do, including this podcast, is always about music. And that's why I really believe that all of the social movements, all of the things that we do, all of the change that we need to make, and then we always need to make change. Even in the best of times, we need to continue to make change because we're always moving. We're vibrations. We're always in motion. It's very easy for me to simply say we are in motion And whatever I am doing to try and impact other people's feelings, other people's knowledge, other people's experiences, if I start to understand it from the perspective of music, now I understand it. So, at our root, we're just a whole lot of strings that are vibrating. And when we meet somebody who's vibrating at the same level that we are, it's love, baby. When we meet somebody who's vibrating at a very cacophonous way, go into the mosh pit, but stay the hell out of politics until you listen to something that calms you down. To my mind, if we really want to make the world a better place, let's try and vibrate a little differently, a little more sonorously, a little more harmoniously. I know it seems awful abstract and kind of, I don't know, crunchy granola, but I'm just looking at science. I'm just looking at hard science. And by the way, religion too, because all religions, one of the ways that people feel, you can go from one part of the country to another part of the country. When you go to a place of religion, another religious institution far away from yours, and you start hearing the same hymns, the same music, suddenly you feel like you're part of something big, something else. They were strangers a moment ago, and now we're all singing in unison or in harmony. That's meaningful. So in these very turbulent times, the one thing I would recommend to people, get those frustrations out, get that anger out, get that whatever the passions out. It's okay. Go to that mosh pit. And then when you come out, when you're among the rest of us, try and find a little bit more harmony. Because I think that ultimately, as silly as that may sound, ultimately, I think it'll work. Hey, what if I'm right? Thanks so much. This is Ian Heller. Hi. Welcome to What If I'm Right with Ian Heller. Today I have a very special guest, an old friend, an incredible musician, and an even better human being. My friend Buddy Booker, who is joining us today, was born and raised in Harlem, spent Sundays at 409 Edgecombe Avenue in Sugar Hill. Does that sound familiar? Maybe it doesn't, but it should. It was known as Harlem's House of Celebrities because it was the home of intellectual, cultural, and artistic giants like W.E.B. Du Bois, Thurgood Marshall, Joe Louis, Duke Ellington, Lena Horne, just to mention a few. Buddy started playing bass at the age of 12 as a student of studio musician and Broadway performer Ed Lord. He received his degree from Bennington College as an upright bass player focusing on black music. At Bennington, he studied with luminaries of contemporary music like Bill Dixon and the legendary Milford Graves, who Buddy credits with having changed his life. After studying Western harmony at Columbia University, Buddy worked with world-class musicians and became an adjunct professor at the New School, while at the same time NYU was sending him bass students, helping him launch his illustrious career as a bass teacher, which he's been doing for 40 years, while keeping up his chops as a performer, playing in New York and places like the Cotton Club and touring throughout the country. My good, wonderful friend and former bandmate, and I miss him terribly because I don't get to play with him anymore, Buddy Booker. Buddy, welcome to What If I'm Right with me, Ian Heller.
Such a sweet and loving intro. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, well, if I had lied, it would have been one thing, but I think I just tailored it so that they didn't realize even that there was so much more that I could have said. Anyway, buddy, I am so grateful for you to give us some time. I know that you have a tremendous amount of things on your plate all the time. And we certainly can relate to the fact that the two of us always have too much to do, but as soon as we have too little to do, we're bored to death. So we have only ourselves to blame. But you've been teaching for 40 years. I want to start out with why bass? I mean, my goodness. Most people like to be in the front like me, going out and trying to get everybody to, yeah, every woman to swoon. You're in the back, basically holding the rest of us up. Why bass?
It's a great question. And I don't know that I ask this question to all my students all the time. Thank you for asking the question because I have to actually think about that. It just resonates with me. It's just kind of who I am. I'm a support character that likes to help evolve the people around me while picking and choosing opportunities to shine. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, so picking and choosing opportunities to shine. For me, it's the complete opposite. It's picking and choosing moments where I can rest and be out of the limelight, but then I want to get right back under those hot spotlights. Um, when you teach bass, I know, it's one thing when people just start to learn how to do something like, the first day you're a teacher, you're really not very good at it. And how long did it take until you decided, I think I'm getting pretty good at this? Because I'm sure, forget about your humility for a moment. I'm sure there came a time when you said, you know, I think I'm valuable. When did that come about and why?
Well, I think I'm innately a really good teacher um, because of my shortcomings. I'm dyslexic, and one thing that somebody told me when I was in third grade was that I was stupid, and I go through life thanking that person every day because that stupidity somehow got me into Columbia. What it also taught me was that I learned different. And if you know anything about dyslexia, it's that people look at life differently. So when I realized that that was the case, I realized that life is a gradient, and that means that everybody learns differently. So then I started studying people. So people sit in my chair, they want to learn bass, and when they sit in the chair, part of what the fascination for me is how they learn. So I've always had the ability to go in and understand how people learn. So from that perspective, I think from day one, I hit the ground running. Now, I believe because I'm old and, there's one of the differences between young people and old people is old people need to start from the beginning. Young people had the internet. Yes, I was born and had achieved sentience prior to the internet. It was 3 weeks after dirt was created. I know that. Old people, or I can speak for myself, I need to find the beginning of something and then the middle and then the end. So teaching proficiency has gotten better as I've gotten older. I don't know that I could pinpoint the time. The difference between the way I just presented and the way young people, they jump in the middle and start learning. And that's a completely different way to access information. So with all that put together and amalgamated, I start to use all of my life experience to evolve people. And I think that although day one I had a leg up on a lot of other people because I was focused on my own personal pedagogy, I think that as I learned more about what the end was, the better teacher I got. I'm sorry, that was a long-winded response to your question, but I think to sum it up, the last 10 years, I've become fearless and fierce. But prior to that, I know I can put my head down on the pillow at night that I have put really, really good bass players into the world. People who work more than I do, people who are in stadiums who call me all the time and thank me. So that was sort of a convoluted answer, but hopefully you got a lot of what.
Not at all. That wasn't convoluted at all. It was very direct and very clear. It just had a lot of, as you have said many, many times, your favorite word. There was just a lot of nuance
Yeah.
to the because there's a lot of nuance in our careers. It's very interesting. One of the things, and look, we played together. Not as far as I'm concerned, not nearly long enough. But we played together, and one of the things, when you're a front man, which is what I am, I always like being in the guy that's in the front of the band, in the front of it, and I'm also perfectly happy being the harmony rather than the melody. I'm okay with being in the background, but the reason why I'm comfortable in both spaces is because I think the very thing that makes you a good teacher and a good bass player, and me, I believe, to be a good teacher and a good musician, is that neither one of us starts with what comes out of us, but what comes in. We are both always focused on what our ears are hearing, what our eyes are seeing, before we start communicating what our mouths want to, or in your case, your fingers, and in my case too, when I play keyboard. So to me, the first thing is what's happening, because the next thing that I have to do is interact with that. And if I'm paying attention, I'm not going to interact with you the same way I would interact with somebody else because you're not acting the same way. And so, what I would suggest is that the thing that makes you a terrific musician is the very same thing that makes you a terrific teacher, which is that you listen and you watch and then you offer, guidance. So that's my way of giving myself praise in your shadow by praising you. So
A lot of room here, baby.
So I want to get first with a little bit of personal, but I mean, nothing embarrassing, obviously, but you are the father of two children that you described as, and you continue to describe as forever children, children that you will always be there teaching. I know your son passed away uh, tragically a few years ago, but how did that inform you, both as a musician and as a teacher, to have two children? And maybe you can explain, to whatever extent that you're comfortable, their where they are, or the kinds of children they are.
Tremendous question. Really tremendous question. On walking out to the playground with my two children when they were very young, like this, a child on each arm. And
Twins, by the way, people should know.
yeah,
So twins, yeah,
twins, boy and girl twins.
yeah.
So we would be in the playground, and all of a sudden, people would notice that they were different, and they would, what's the word?
Scatter.
Yeah, retreat. Yeah, retreat, scatter. All those are good words. And that was incredibly painful for me, not for them, because I don't know if that they were aware. But it kind of speaks to anyone who's been marginalized or in any way been challenged outside of the norm understands that there is a challenge for you. And that challenge is to overcome whatever is presented. That's very powerful. And so when I taught when I looked at my children, my boy and my girl twin, and I said, well, let me be the enlightened father. I will put trucks and dolls in the middle of the room, and then I'll let my kids have at it. In my case, and let me emphasize, not in all cases, my son went and got the truck and my daughter went and got the doll. But I know that that's not always the case. So yes, we listen up and have observational expertise about people. And if we have deference as to who they really are, we have the opportunity to help people excel. So back to that bass question, when the bass is bumping and it's grouping, Everybody does better. And sometimes it's it's quite so. Sometimes it's so. One day I remember I was playing, I was going, is anybody listening to me? I stopped, and the band leader was pissed. He was looking at me, and everybody in the audience was bewildered. What happened? They didn't really know what happened.
Yeah, the bottom fell out.
Was missing.
The bottom fell out, man.
Exactly. So sometimes the best way to influence people is to do so in a very stealth way, and or seemingly stealth way. So that's part of the answer to your question. The other part of the answer to the question, I would not be the bass player or the teacher I am if I didn't have the challenge of dealing with two children on the autistic spectrum. On the opposite side of the spectrum, my son had 12 words, and my daughter is high-functioning Asperger's, who even in her 40s is struggling to realize that she's neurodivergent. So that made me very acquainted with the concept of turning notes into dollars, and that's what I do.
What do you mean notes into dollars?
Well, how do I commodify being a musician? There's so many people who want to be a musician full time, and they come at it from lots of different angles. But if I do certain things like teach amazing lessons, people pay me money with a smile on their face. If I have to learn 30 songs in 2 days, I come in and knock it out the park. The band leader's on the phone calling me again. I'm monetizing frequencies, and specifically low sonic frequencies, into bringing what little money, enough to live on and raise kids, into my life. Turning notes into dollars.
So when we first met, when I first auditioned for the band that you were in, you were a hack. You were driving a cab at a time when being a cab driver was the most dangerous job in New York City. And New York City was pretty dangerous at the time, which we both know. And being a cab driver put you kind of in the middle of all sorts of things that they made movies out of. You know, you're all by yourself with strangers coming in and out. And there's a lot of violence going on in our city at that time. How did you manage? You know, you're talking about how you commodified your ability as a bass player and as a teacher, but how did you you're not starting with a silver spoon in your mouth here. You know, you're starting with everything is on you, and you already had your kids at that time.
Another really good question, but I want to back it up and challenge for your premise just a little bit.
Please.
I was on the road after I graduated and went to Columbia. I was on the road playing as a musician, earning my entire money as a musician. And then I was on the road doing a band that played a lot of different venues. And in that band, I did what they told me not to do, which was mess with the singer of the band. But at 25, you know, I was particularly arrogant, and God smacked me down hard. So I went from 6 days a week, 4 sets a night, playing music, to driving a cab in the space of no time, because I married the singer in the band and he got kicked out of the band. All right. And so
why were you kicked out of the band? It's not automatic that you get kicked out of bands when you start dating the singer.
Yeah, well, this band was not happening. And I was also a little bit done. You know, look, to be a bass player, you know, you have to sign on to being married to a drummer. And if a drummer is somebody who can make you look great or make you look terrible. And I was having issues with the drummer. I was like, all right, I'm done with this guy. He's annoying. His name will remain nameless. So that was part of it. And then when I got off the road, I realized I had lots of road opportunities with other bands, but I had to make money every day because I didn't want to end up on Judge Judy. Never saw me on Judge Judy, tell you that for sure. So what I would do is work 12 weeks and then go on the road. And then, but, oh, I missed one point, the point where I want to challenge you. Before I did that, before I did that, I went to Albert Einstein, graduated at the top of my class at being an EMT, thinking I could probably be a medic pretty quickly. That was the most dangerous job because it was right at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic.
Wow.
What happened was they said, okay, you could make basically $1.95 and risk your life, or you can drive a cab. So those were the two choices that I saw for myself. And so I did a little bit of ambulance driving. I go, wait, I'm not making a lot of money. I'm putting my life on the line. This is crazy. You know what I'm saying? So, and I come from nothing but like doctors and musicians. So that wasn't easy. They were always trying to make me into some kind of doctor in my family. But
well, that's not surprising given who your parents were.
That was, so when I did that, and I loved the job, but hated the risk and hated the paycheck. So then I talked to somebody, jumped into a cab, and then I realized I could go on the road, come back. I could make $100 every day, and then if I went on the road, I could go and come back and still make that $100 a day. And I did that back and forth. Back and jump on the road, drive a cab. In fact, a lot of cab drivers. In fact, some of my teachers from Bennington were Jeff Hoyer was also a cab driver. So people that taught me music, that was a thing that they did back there in the early 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we started when we started playing together, it was interesting. I that was the first major band experience that I ever had. In fact, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I was practicing law at the time. I was in a small law firm. I was absolutely miserable because I was told that I was going to be a criminal litigation attorney. I was just clerking for a judge, which is a pretty prestigious position right at a law school. And I was told by this small firm that I'm going to get a lot of, that I'm going to start doing some criminal defense work. I turned down a job to work for the Manhattan DA's office, which was a pretty cool offer. And started working with them. And after about a year and a half of finding that Fred, my boss, anytime there was something good, he was going to be doing it, which is his prerogative. And I said, okay, this sucks, man. I mean, this sucks. I was in like landlord-tenant court at 9:30. Then at 11 o'clock, I might have been in bankruptcy court. Then in the afternoon, might have done a hearing for a probable cause for a criminal matter. And then at night, I might have been doing a closing or something like. Every day was something like 20 different things, and I was never getting good at anything except being miserable. So I gave them 13 weeks notice. And they, which, by the way, for everybody listening, don't ever do that, because I started using, ticking every single second. I would just like counting down for 13 weeks. It just doesn't work. So I was counting down for 13 weeks to go on the road with my band. I told the bosses, Fred and Sharon, and they said, "You're going on the road with your band? We didn't even know you were in a band." I said, "I'm not. That's why I need 13 weeks. Now, this all comes back to, during that time, I started looking around for people. I had, I'm cocky as hell. And quite frankly, when it comes to music, particularly singing, it's like, yeah, I'll back it up. I ain't worried about that. So I was looking around, and this is where, if you hadn't made the big mistake that you made, getting involved with the lead singer, we wouldn't know each other. Because your, at that time, ex-wife, Cherie, was the woman I met who, when we got into a conversation, I told her all about me. She said, "You've got to meet my ex-husband, Buddy. They're looking for a lead singer, and I think you'd be perfect." Now, by the way, that was based on only what I told her about me. I hadn't sung a thing. I was there as an attorney representing bands. And she just decided, he seems confident enough that I trust him. And I went auditioned. So if it hadn't been for that big mistake, honestly, one of the most important phases of my life and continuing friendship with you, I mean, it would have been something else, but I wouldn't have had this. So thank you for that big mistake, because it certainly helped me.
And I'm going to respond that two ways. For all those who are listening that don't know, Ian has a voice like a bell. It's beautiful. When we were auditioning, I was in this band, and we had work, and we wanted to hire somebody, and we went through a lot of singers, and that was a movie unto itself. It was unbelievably funny, Tally. I think that was the first. I'm a journeyman. I've worked, people hire me on, your bass player dies and you need me to learn 2 sets in a day. You hire me. I mean, that's who I am. So I was in the process of this band helping them pick a singer, and we went through all these people, and most of them were crazy, but a lot of them were really good. And Ian had a voice like a bell. I think he should have been a cantor, but that's a whole nother story. In fact, when it came time to vote on the singer, they went around the room, and I said, "Let's pick the cantor." And I don't regret any of that. And all those mistakes that I've made have proven to have paid off with all kinds of dividends, some of which have been horrifically painful, and others have shown that adversity and perseverance, when held together, can prove to create phenomenal, miraculous results. So anybody who's listening to this and might be in a negative space, there's an old saying: when you're going through hell, keep going.
So it's funny because in my youth, when I was trying to prove that I was an intellectual, I might have said, well, that's like Nietzsche, we've got that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. But I'm past that need to prove myself. And so I'd rather quote Batman, which is, why do we fall down, Master Bruce, to learn how to pick ourselves up? That to me is even more beautiful than that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger. That's just kind of like, God, I'm going to be near death. I fell down, I picked myself up. And that to me is one of the great lessons that you learn while you're young, but it doesn't really start to be noticeable dividends to most of us. There are some people who are precocious and they figure that out very young. It took me quite some time to realize that so many of the things that I consider to be losses, defeats, embarrassments, whatever, that at some point they're going to be one of two things. They're either going to make me, and it may be both things, they're either going to make me just more, wiser and more experienced, or they're going to be great stories. Because every time negative things happen with my kids, and they're old now, they're in their mid-20s, but I still say it. It's like, whatever disaster befalls you, just remember how this feels and remember to tell this story, because that is what teaching is. It's taking not your victories. People learn much more from their mistakes and from your mistakes than they do from your accomplishments. Mistakes mean they give you permission to be human. Go ahead.
Small story to really bring home that point. I was in college playing with a band, and we went to Albany, because it's not that far from Vermont, and played this gig, and it was the wrong band for the gig, and we got booed off stage.
Oof.
I don't know that many people have gotten booed off stage. And I would, at first I thought, this is it. This is the end. I better figure out how to get my truck driver's license. I got to figure out something was happening. But the next day I woke up and I said, I'm still alive. Humiliated. And, there's a big difference between, as I don't have to tell y'all, being humiliated and having humility.
Mm.
But that humiliation gave me a greater humility. I said, well, it was horrible. I never want to go through that again, and I haven't so far, knock on wood. Um, but it was incredibly empowering. You have to face hard times with a hard conviction, or you'll crumble.
You know, that's a great lesson. I'm not going to take this in the direction of politics. You know how easy it is for me to go into that lane. That's not what I'm doing here. Right now, I'm looking at the whole world, but at least my corner of it, and I'm seeing a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of anger. And I'm not talking about from one side or the other. I'm talking about all around me. It's just a lot of pain and uncertainty and anger and frustration. And I have long said, and once again, I don't mean to take this into a political lane, but I do want to use it as a means of getting out of where we are. When we suffer, it makes us reflect about our own, it is the humiliation leading to humility. The idea that, oh my God, how did I get myself into this, or how did I fall into this? Whoever the blame is, the next question is, how do I get myself out of this? And to know that you have the strength because you've done it before, or because you're so young and you don't even think in terms of defeat. Like when you're older, you know you're going to lose, but you're going to be okay. When you're younger, there is this invincibility that just pushes you through. Both of those things are absolutely miraculous. And I think in terms of where we are right now, and I know that over the last 50, 60 years since my youth, we have fallen asleep at the switch as members of a democracy, which is not permitted. It says we the people, and that means we actually have to do stuff. And we haven't. We've been very lucky. We've been living in a golden age in many respects. Not in all, but in many respects. And now everybody's looking around, whether you're from the right or the left, saying, how the hell did we get here? But then we turn it back and we all have to become good musicians, right, buddy? Because the way we get out of this is by not talking, but listening and then talking. That's why I have this show, because I always am listening and I won't shut up at the same time because I'm talking and listening. And I have mastered that. If you play music, you don't stop listening to the drummer because you want to make sure that you're locked in. You put an ear to that drummer and you put an ear to your bass and you say, okay, when are they going to sound beautiful together? And so it's both simultaneously.
You're right. That was really well said. You're right. And what I got out of it was that complacency is the real enemy.
Yes.
That's really the real enemy. And I want to say to people who are not musicians, the one time that everybody becomes a musician is when they're having an argument with their significant other. Ooh. Because you're screaming and listening at the same time. And that's what music is. You have to listen and speak at the same time. And that's the way anybody who's not a musician can get to that concept, because most people, I would imagine, have been there.
But by the way, it's not, I don't have a favorite kind of music. I always think that's like the silliest thing. Like one time I might be in the mood for this or that. But one of my all-time favorite things to listen to every now and again is New Orleans jazz. Because if there was anything that you're talking about, it's not a band. It's like 30 people and they're all soloists, and somehow, because they're all on their own gig. And yet, because they're geniuses at it, they're listening not to one, not to two, but to 10 other instruments who are going in their own direction. And God is my witness, they are able to figure out how to dance between those raindrops. And that to me is just magic because it's not even written down a lot of times. It's just, okay, here's the chord progression, guys, have at it. And that is absolutely what life at its best is. Okay, 340 million people in this country. We are in charge. We're a democracy. Okay, kids, have at it.
Shout out to Louis Armstrong, touted as the first person to create the jazz solo. Maybe, maybe not, but was definitely the best at it, in my opinion. And shout out to Congo Square, which is the birth of Americans' great art form.
Now, by the way, you coming from and I'm not suggesting you're limited by this, but you come from a very strong Black tradition. I come from a very strong Jewish tradition. And I would say that the closest thing, the thing that to me, it's almost impossible for me to tell the difference except the color of the people on the bands. New Orleans jazz and klezmer. You listen to klezmer bands, if you don't know what it's a Jewish form of New Orleans jazz.
Well, if you want to talk about the beauty of the relationship between Blacks and Jews, and I choose to do that because I think everybody's talking about all the disparity between different groups. Let's just talk about the Jewish family that gave Louis Armstrong his first cornet.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about that. Let's talk about Benny Goodman, who got great jazz greats gigs on klezmer gigs when they were. And let me tell you, no matter what era you are as a musician, you need a gig. I was at rehearsal last night, and they were talking about, in 2 weeks we get to get gigs at this particular venue, and I said, well, I'm going to give you my dates for next year, and they're looking at me like, you got dates for next year? I said, look, are you kidding me? I mean, look, I'm back to notes in the dollars. I tout all those experiences, having developmentally disabled twins, getting booed off stage, teachers who taught old school. I don't know if you saw Whiplash movie. Anybody see the movie Whiplash? In our movie group, we haven't seen this. We should see.
Well, we're in a movie group. We'll have to mention that in a moment, but go ahead.
It's brutal. And it's old school science. I mean, when I went to Bennington, Bill Dixon would have our master ensemble on Friday night, and it was open to the public. So that was the night we were trying to get with somebody. And so all of our potential suitors would come and watch us to get brutalized to things like, what makes you think you are a musician or could possibly ever become a musician?
Yeah.
And it just goes on for that. And then they excoriate you to the point of, I'm one of the few musicians who came out of Bennington who does it for a living. And there are lots of old school teachers who are super harsh. I mean, super, super harsh. And so I don't teach that way, but there are times when you got to be harsh with people.
Well, yeah, but I think...
Well, I don't think you need to live that way. I just think...
Well, but that's actually what I was about to say, which is when I went to Manhattan School of Music, I studied piano and cello there. And at the time, there was really only one form in the United States of teaching. It was the Russian school, which basically, I don't know why they call it the Russian school. They should call it the Nazi approach. It's like, you did it a particular way. And by the way, I had really lovely teachers. It's not like anybody was mean to me. They weren't. In fact, they were too nice to me, honestly, because I was like a charming little kid who was very, very talented, but didn't want to work and was told by his parents, hey, look, your sisters can be professional musicians. And by the way, they are. My oldest sister went first to Broadway, and then she was out in California with her husband. And like in the 80s and 90s, half the movies, and after that, half the movies they played on. Then my middle sister, she's with the Metropolitan Opera, a violinist there. And my other sister, she's a music therapist and a harpist and a pianist. So it's like, but I was the boy. I'm supposed to be a lawyer. And so I wasn't supposed to be, like, it didn't matter if I was a good musician. And so my teachers treated me exactly that way, and I was all the more happy for it because I would come to Manhattan School in my baseball uniform, because that's okay for a boy. Anyway, just this whole notion of I would go into my lessons and I hadn't practiced, but I had a real good ear. And I knew what the song was supposed to say, what the piece was supposed to sound like, because whatever I was playing on the piano, my sister played before. So I've heard it a million times. So I go to the piano and I'm hardly looking at the music. I'm just playing. And my teacher would say things like, Ian, that's really pretty, but that's not okay. That's not on the music. And I get why that was the way they taught, but damn, did they blow it. Because if you had a kid who at the age of 8 years old was figuring out the harmonic appropriateness of letting his fingers play what he thinks is the right thing, even if it's wrong and it sounds good, that's when you say, okay, Ian, you know what I want you to do now? I want you to keep on playing. I want you to make this up. That's what would have been perfect for me. Instead, it was like, then we started talking baseball. You know, that it's a shame.
I ran into, I think, the head of the string department in Manhattan, and he told me this joke that I never forgot. He said, what does the string department in Manhattan School of Music have to in common with the Beatles? And you know what he said? Neither of which have played together since '69.
I don't know if anybody else is laughing, but that made my day. Wow, that's just
it was incredible. You know, when I lost the point, but
well, while you're coming back to it, what it actually when you don't embrace what your students' gifts are, you're not teaching.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's
that,
the one thing.
Yeah. So just to finish the thought, that to me meant that the Russian school was not about listening to your student, but listening to their fingers. It's like, no, that isn't your student. Your student has fingers. Your student's your student. And you're not listening if you're not seeing what that student is really gifted at.
That's the one thing that your introduction, which was, again, lovely, missed, is that when I went to Bennington, there was a classical music department and a black music department, which meant music of the diaspora. So it was not only jazz, it was music. Professor Milford Graves turned me on to music all over the world. And so I have a degree in both. And the divide, this is a point I wanted to make when I was thinking about doing this interview. I think somehow we have to maintain the traditions and also innovate. And that's what we are faced with at this time period in life that perhaps we've never been faced with before. So when I'm playing classical music, or when I did on the upright, I was playing, it was a different mindset of how to play music.
Yes.
Incredible. And every kind of music is amazing.
Yeah.
Period. There is every kind of music is.
It's glorious.
It's
all glorious.
You have to respect that. So when it was time for my senior concert for the black music department, I was feverishly up nights writing charts out. And I got to like the day or the day before, and I had like, it must have been 8 bars of a tacit. And I had all the strings from the classical department reading all my parts because I knew they were going to be really great at that. And then I got to this 8-bar tacit and I said, well, you can just simile, you can follow suit. And oh my God, they broke out into a sweat. I thought I was going to have to call, the therapist or something because they were free. I said, all right, that's all right. It's a tacit. You don't have to play anything. So, and that's what I think is wrong in some ways with the world. It's like you need to understand the disciplines, you need to respect traditions, and you also need to allow for improvisation because all of that is good. I like to walk through the world and say sometimes you got to read the chart and sometimes you don't. And that's kind of like my philosophy to life. Always be adept at both of those.
I think right now what we have is a whole lot of very angry soloists out there.
Angry what?
A whole bunch of angry soloists. And they're not very good at their solos because they're actually not playing with the rest of us. When I say soloists, I mean it's like they went into a studio with a soundproof room and they're now playing and they don't realize the music is going on all around them. And so, to my mind, and we only have a minute or two left, and you're going to come back because I
Oh,
just
right.
enjoy the hell out of talking to you. But
Right back.
um, when people are thinking that 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 society is what it is, okay, and that it is encroaching on them and it's making them unhappy or angry or sad or whatever it is, to my mind, that what we're seeing these days in polarization is they go headstrong into whatever they double down on what they're doing. Lord knows that there's a lot of people at the very top who are modeling that. And they just say, okay, I'm going to double down what I'm playing. And they think that what they want to accomplish is to drown out all of the sound around them so that eventually people will start playing with them in unison. It's like, no, no, you don't understand. All it's going to be is cacophony. All it's going to be is that you're going to be playing louder. And you know what happens when one person starts playing louder? Everybody has to match the sound. And it becomes escalation of and then nobody is listening to anybody. It's the Tower of Babel. That's what we're at right now. And I, like you, am not somebody who just kind of sits and says, well, we're doomed. I look at it quite the opposite. We're about, I don't know when it's going to be, my lifetime, I couldn't tell you. But we are on the precipice of an incredible change because that's the only thing that can happen after so many people are working as individuals, is that eventually it really comes home. You can't make it alone. You can't do this by yourself. There are only a handful of human beings in the history of the world that can impose their will on others, and they always end up defeated in the end. Always, always, always. It's the people that bring us together, that teach us to listen to one another, even as we're speaking with passion. Those are the people, and quite frankly, I that's what I want to be for the people listening here and for my students in college that I teach and for my clients, whomever. It's always, we got to talk and listen, walk and chew gum at the same time. Otherwise, it's a real disaster.
In closing, I'd like to say that I'd like to speak to your question about why the bass. Why the bass now at the other end is that some of the greatest moments I've had playing music is when the band is grooving their ass off and the dancers are dancing their asses off. I'm watching the dancers, and as I've picked the best dancers in the room, and they'll teach me how to play. They'll start moving like this. Like, oh, I'm gonna move like that too. You know what I'm saying? I say, oh, how about if I do this? And then I see them move, and there's this metaphysical brilliance that happens. That everybody is part of the music and the dance together, where there's this connection between performer and audience that goes back and forth. That's brilliant.
And think about the ancient traditions of exactly that when we go back to, as you know, like the pre-society days when we're basically all in groups and tribes. And music and dance are the things that at the end of the day they celebrate and remember their exploits from the day. The defeats and the victories are all, they're all kind of codified in this musical dance, like, because it's all about, those are, they're just passion, and the passion has to come out, but it can't be just about you. How passionate can you be about you in a vacuum? So anyway, to me, all life is vibration. All music is the demonstration that vibration is the most important physical manifestation of life is vibration, and that it is everything, and that life is not just that which is animate, but that is everything, the rocks to the humans, that it's all part of vibration that make us all fascinating and impossible to deal with.
Gotta go, but I want to say to everyone that it's amazing to have you as a friend, and we're ending off agreeing, but I don't want you guys to get it twisted. We have some of the best fun agreeing to disagree.
Oh, amen to that.
So there you go.
Amen to
Thank
that.
you, Ian, for the
Thank you,
opportunity.
buddy.
Take care, man. Be
Your
well.
students are lucky. You take care.
Thank you. Likewise. Bye bye.